Hi, I'm Keith from 2A Cops. In this episode, we're going to talk about what the chiefs of police think about gun control, and you're not going to like it. All right, so the International Association of Chiefs of Police is an organization that represents most of the country's chiefs of police. To be clear, the chief of a police department does not represent the thoughts and feelings of the line officer, the guy that's responding to 911 calls. To the contrary, a chief usually, nobody ever decides that they want to be a chief of police. They don't grow up saying, I want to be the chief of police. They grow up saying they want to be a cop arresting bad guys. From my experience, people that become chiefs, although some of them are actually pretty good guys, a majority of them didn't spend a lot of time in the trenches, working cases and responding to calls. They did the minimum amount of time on patrol, another minimum amount of time in some specialized unit, got promoted, and then just kept getting promoted repeatedly fairly quickly. Pro tip, if you ever see a sergeant or a lieutenant with one service stripe, that usually means that guy's doesn't have a lot of experience in the trenches. That's a guy that did the minimum, got promoted really quick. One service stripe means that they've been on for a little over 5 years. So I was looking for information on this one specific anti-gunner chief that I wanted to kind of expose a little bit. And during that time, I found the IACP's, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the organization representing the chiefs. I found a position paper that they wrote on gun control. And when I read it, I wanted to vomit. It was pretty bad. It starts, basically, it just outlines what they think about all these different gun control issues. I'll link the article that we wrote on 2acops.com so you can, it's got a link in there somewhere with this specific position paper, but I'll put it up in the video for you so you can see it too. It starts off with body armor, which, number one, has nothing to do with gun control, but let's get into it because they wrote about it. Specifically, the IACP says the IACP supports legislation to prohibit the mail order sale of bulletproof vests and body armor to all individuals except sworn or certified law enforcement officers. So nobody else needs body armor? What about the clerk at the 7-Eleven that works in a high crime area? Might he want body armor? What about the person that makes money drops for their business? You think they might not want body armor? What a bouncer at a bar? He might want it. I gotta tell you, I'll never forget. I helped on a homicide as a young patrol cop where a lady, Kay, she was a very nice lady, worked at a bar and was doing the nightly drop from the bar's proceeds, and somebody shot her and took the money, and she died. I'll never forget that call because she was a nice lady. And we couldn't believe somebody killed her, but do you think she might want body armor? To say that only cops should have body armor is kind of ridiculous. Okay, next up is concealed carry reciprocity. The IACP specifically states, the IACP opposes any federal legislative proposals that would either preempt and or mandate the liberalization of individual states' concealed carry weapons, CCW laws, pertaining to the carrying of concealed weapons in other states without meeting that state's requirements. First off, I was a sergeant, and I would have kicked this back for that ugly run-on sentence that they just wrote. I digress. So law enforcement officers have something called HR 218, the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act. It allows us to carry in all 50 states. Why can't civilians have that too? Why can't a person that lives in, let's say, Wyoming, who's visiting California, be able to carry a weapon there if they have a concealed firearms permit? They've had a background check. They probably had training and some other stuff going on. And when they visit California, what, that's supposed to magically stop at the border? California is where they need it. I was a cop in California. My partner, Matt, who runs 2A Cops with me, he worked in California as well, and we saw many people victimized that were from out of state, and I would love for them to be able to carry guns when they visit somewhere else. There'd probably be a lot less crime going on with people defending themselves. Look, it's too hard to keep track of what each state thinks about it, and it would make it so much easier for citizens to know that they can carry in all 50 states. Honestly, it's time that states like California, Illinois, New York, Washington, D.C. got on board with the rest of the country and issued concealed carry permits like everybody else so we can protect ourselves. Next up is concealed carry weapons on college and university campuses. The IACP says, in response to the facts and statistics surrounding gun violence and related risks at U.S. colleges and universities, the IACP supports the prohibition of concealed carry weapons upon U.S. college and university campuses. First off, facts and statistics. Where did they get them? They didn't list them. What, so I'm just supposed to assume that you have facts and statistics? I've had more than one chief lie to me in my career. So forgive me if I don't take for granted that you have these facts and statistics. I would counter that if, like, as an example, in the state that I live in now, the campus security officers in the largest university in the state are unarmed. Well, somebody should have a gun, so why not let the students protect themselves? I think and also to note that our universities haven't had an active shooter. Could you imagine if there was an active shooter and there happened to be a concealed carrier there protecting themselves? In our state, if you have an enhanced CCW, then students are allowed to carry on a college campus. I think it's wonderful, and I think that needs to happen more often. The chiefs have it wrong. Your stats and statistics, show them, man. Let's see it. All right, here we go. Semi-automatic weapons. What do the chief think about semi-autos? You can kind of get a feel for where they're going. They've full-on eaten the gun control sandwich here. All right, so the IACP says specifically, semi-automatic assault weapons are routinely the weapons of choice for gang members and drug dealers. They're regularly encountered in drug busts and are all too often used against police officers. The IACP has been a strong supporter of the assault weapons ban since 1992, and our membership has approved several reauthorizations of support in the years since. Okay, look, let's start with the drug dealing issue. So I was at one time a recipient of California's very prestigious Narcotics Officer of the Year. It's hard to get. I'm proud that I got it. I also traveled the world teaching cops how to do drug investigations. So I'd like to think that I know a thing or two about dope investigations. One of the things that I found catching guns on drug dealers, and also, let me back up, they talk about gang members. I also led a gang team in the San Francisco East Bay. Look, let's cut this down. The guns that I recovered off those people, more often than not, I'm not saying all the time, but most of the time, it was a stolen gun. And it was usually a piece of shit like a High Point or something like that. It was very rarely a really nice gun. Did we get assault weapons off these people? Sure. But when you look at the statistics of these High Points and other crap guns being used to kill people versus an assault weapon, or what they phrase as an assault weapon, yeah, the High Points and the other crap take it by far. They win the award for the one being used most. So cops don't want to see assault weapons banned. We like them. We have them. We like that citizens have them. Are our friends dying? Absolutely. I've lost more than a few friends to gun violence. Matt and I addressed this specific topic in our podcast, 2A Cops, where we talked about losing friends and still supporting the Second Amendment. In one of our polls, which you can click here and see that poll, one of the officers replied back that he had been shot and he still supports supports the right to carry a gun because he knows it wasn't the gun that came after him, it was the person having the gun that came after him. And that's from a guy that was shot. So look, the chiefs don't represent us. They're using some false information and some smoke and mirrors to say why you shouldn't have an assault rifle, but they're absolutely wrong. Next up is Firearms Enforcement. When I saw this, I had a little bit of hope that we might see some common ground here. But the IACP specifically said in this one, the IACP urges Congress to increase resources to better allow state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies and the DOJ to enable greater prosecution of individuals for Brady Act violations. Okay, let's back up. First, you have to know what the Brady Act is. Basically, it just means that you got to pass a background check to get to buy a gun from an FFL. And if the check doesn't come back in time, they can hold on to that gun for a certain amount of time. Okay, let's just back up for a minute. I'm on the street as a cop. When I first started in 1989, I was able to do a check of somebody's criminal history in seconds. Now you can do it on your phone out in the field and do a check and look at all their criminal history for their whole life on your phone in seconds. If you're requiring me, the federal government requiring me to do a background check, then I expect that that check is instant. And if that check doesn't come back, that's your fault, not mine. So give me the gun so I can get going. I really thought that the IACP and us, the street cops, would have some common ground on this one, where they might say, go after guys that are committing crimes with guns, and I'd be all for that. But here again, they're victimizing regular people. And that's what the IACP keeps supporting. They're supporting legislation that's just victimizing the common person. So far, we have absolutely nothing in common with the chiefs. Firearms Offender Registry. The IACP says the reduction of firearms-related violent crime has been and continues to be a major goal of the IACP. Studies have shown that firearm offenders have a higher recidivist rate for committing other firearms-related violent crime with firearms than the rate of sexual offenders. Therefore, the IACP supports creating a federal registry similar to the Sexual Offender Registry for offenders who have been previously convicted of a felony, firearm violation, or a misdemeanor that involved violent or threatening acts with firearms. Okay, do you see what they're doing here? They're comparing guns, people that use guns, with sex registrants, because everybody hates sex offenders, right? So let's lump guns in with sex offenders, guys that are molesting kids, because that'll get you going, right? Let's just back up for a minute. As a street cop, how is a federal offender registry going to help me in an investigation? It's not. Our sex offender registries are not national. They're state. There isn't a national one. But let's back up though. Let's keep going back. If we had a registry of gun offenders, how does that help me? I can look up their criminal history literally in 1 second on my phone to see what they've been convicted of. Why would a registry help me? It doesn't make sense. Next up is firearm purchase waiting period. The IACP supports a waiting period for the purchase of a handgun. Okay, I've written about this before several times. I remember when I was at work in California, we have a gun waiting period. I can't remember what it is. Let's just say it's 10 days. I went into the gun shop. I waited in line. I was buying a gun because I was going back into narcotics, and there was a specific gun that I wanted to carry doing undercover stuff. So I'm in uniform in the gun store. I'm waiting in line. I have a Glock 35 on my hip, a Glock 43 in my pocket. I have an H&K 416 full auto in the trunk of my car and an Accuracy International sniper rifle in the back. Why do I have to wait a waiting period? Not just because I'm a cop, but clearly my cooling off period. Why do I need it? I've got access to better stuff than what I'm buying right now. There was a guy in line with me, and we were talking, and I was talking to him about how ridiculous this was, this whole waiting period. And he told me that he had a CCW. Now look, in some counties in California, it's really tough to get a CCW. The county that I was in, where this man got his CCW from, it's impossible. Out of the 2 million people that live in this very small county, it's very dense, they issue like 300 a year. That's it. I mean, you have less than a 1% chance of getting a CCW in this county, and this guy has one, but he's got to wait a cooling off period, but he's packing a gun in the gun store when he picks it up. What the fuck does that do? And then lastly, on that cooling off period, this was an unfortunate one, but it shows you that it doesn't really work. A lady decided she wanted to die. She bought a gun, waited 10 days. She bought the gun, but in California, you can't buy gun and ammo at the same time, so she took the gun home. Left the gun at the house, came back, bought ammo, went back home, loaded the gun, killed herself. She waited the exact amount of time to take care of business, and she did it. This 10-day waiting period is arbitrary and just goes after the regular person on the street. Next up is the gun show loophole. The IACP opposes any legislation that would limit or reduce the ability of our nation's law enforcement agencies to combat the sale of illegal guns. Really? Here we go again. Chiefs have never, I don't want to say have never, have done minimal investigations. They've done minimal street enforcement. I can tell you right now, you shouldn't infringe on people's rights to make it easier for a cop to do an investigation. Look, if there's issues going on with people doing this loophole, then you put undercover cops in there to go find people that are violating the law, and then you investigate it the right way. You don't infringe on the rights of an entire nation just because it makes it easier. F that. The next one is juvenile crime, firearms, disability. The IACP believes that juveniles must be held accountable for their acts of violence. I agree. Therefore, the IACP supports the passage of legislation sometimes referred to as Juvenile Brady, which would permanently prohibit gun ownership by an individual if that individual, while a juvenile, commits a crime that would have triggered a gun disability if their crime had been committed as an adult. Okay, we go back to this big, long, run-on sentence, which is a sergeant. I would have kicked this back to whoever wrote it. But I think we can agree on this one. Yeah, if you commit a crime, like let's say you do a drive-by shooting at 16 years old and you shoot up a house with a gun and you go to jail for that, and now when you come out, yeah, if you were an adult and you lost your gun rights, that's fine. You should not, we're in agreement. You just shouldn't be able to possess a gun if you're out there shooting people up and stuff. Next up, possession of and transfer of certain firearm accessories. The IACP supports legislation that prohibits the possession, import, manufacture, transfer, and sale of trigger cranks, bump fire devices, and similar attachments/accessories designed to increase or modify semi-automatic firearms to automatic weapons. Okay, look, on the street, I had 0 cases where somebody used a bump fire stock to go shoot up some house or whatever. Not saying it hasn't happened. We know it has. Las Vegas shooting is a perfect example. But to be honest, let's go back to the Las Vegas shooting. Totally tragic. We feel for everybody that lost their life there or is traumatized by what they saw there. But if that guy didn't use a bump stock and just used accurate, sustained fire, he would have done more damage. The bump stock probably hindered everything, to be honest, for those of you that understand marksmanship. And again, it wasn't the bump stock that started all this. It was a man that started this. All right, next up. This is the dumbest thing that they've written so far, silencers. The IACP opposes any efforts to remove silencers, in parentheses suppressors, from the purview of the National Firearms Act, in which devices have been registered under since 1934. If silencers are no longer regulated, it would undermine the safety of the public and law enforcement by preventing law enforcement from quickly and effectively responding to active shooters, as silencers make it harder to recognize the sound of gunfire and mask muzzle flash, making it more difficult to locate and engage armed offenders. Again, chiefs are office dwellers. Not many have served time on SWAT or as range masters or whatever. They would have known that silencers are not silent. As an example, here's a dead air silencer. It is a part. It's a gun part. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's a hollow tube, and you should know it's not silent by any stretch of the imagination. They bring up active shooters using silencers. Really? We just talked about the Las Vegas shooting. That guy apparently had silencers on some of his weapons. We all knew he was shooting though, didn't we? And they located him fairly quickly, and then they went ahead and took care of business. Look, the way that they wrote this shows their ignorance in understanding what silencers are. I rarely shoot guns anymore that don't have a silencer on it because my ears are trashed. It's still loud. It's hearing safe, but not hearing comfortable. If you really want total silence, put a silencer on a 22. That's still loud. I mean, you can still hear noise coming out of that, and it's definitely not something that really concerns any of us. It's stupid. Silencers shouldn't be in the NFA. So let's wrap it all up. I agreed with the chiefs on one point. Juveniles that commit crimes that would prohibit them from having a gun, it should carry on into their adulthood. Look, even people that are adults that commit crimes where they're prohibited from having firearms, they can still go back and have that expunged so they can go get firearms later. I've seen it. There's really nothing wrong with it. But we disagree on everything. Look, again, if you leave from this video with one point, please understand chiefs don't represent the thoughts and feelings of cops on the street. If you want to know more about what cops think about gun control, then click on our link to go look at the video we did on a poll where we actually polled cops on what they thought about gun control, and we actually put in their statements about what they thought, and it make you feel pretty happy. So look, chiefs are appointed by a politician. They are very much, they are political creatures, and they don't have a lot of field experience for the most part. I'm sure I'm offending a whole bunch of chiefs in here. But look, man, you guys got to control the IACP then and get them under control with this whole gun control issue, because they're absolutely wrong. And you need to get them on the right side of this gun control issue. What I recommend that you guys do, what can you do? I would recommend that you call out the IACP and their position paper. I would recommend that you contact your chief of police and ask them, do you agree with what the IACP says about gun control? Are you on board with that? And if they say they are, then figure out how to get rid of that guy and move on to somebody else. So that's all I've got for now. Do me a favor. I want you to subscribe to our channel. It would be nice to bump up our numbers a little bit. We put out a lot of good content that we think you would like. Subscribe to our newsletter. We'll put in a link below. Our newsletter, we put out 2A news constantly with a street cop's view of that particular issue, and we do put that out once a week. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media at 2A Cops on all the various platforms. But that's all I've got. Take care and stay safe.
900 North Miami Beach Boulevard, parking lot of Kmart, case number 901. Complainant will be waiting near his 86 white Hyundai.